call this meeting of the State Board of Elections to order. After I get my sound on. All right, I'll call this meeting of the State Board of Elections to order. For the record, we have a quorum. Both Vice Chair O'Bannon and Secretary LaCruz are here with us in person. In addition, we have from the Department, Commissioner Piper, and from the Office of the Attorney General, Carol Lewis. I'd like to say first, I'm very pleased that we're able to resume meeting in person. I'm also pleased that this morning I remembered how to tie a tie, which I haven't done in a year. And Dr. O'Bannon and I are very glad to be back in this room, which for 2 sessions back in the aughts served as our chamber while they were renovating the Capitol. So former delegates appreciate being here. We have a full agenda today. There are 20 agenda items, and there are a number of regulatory issues that have to be disposed of by the 1st of July. Without objection, members of the public who wish to comment will be recognized for 3 minutes. Instructions for those participating in person, by WebEx, or by telephone are found at the bottom of today's agenda. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from 3 different meetings of the board earlier this year. Secretary LaCruz?
Is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 31st, 2021?
So moved. Second. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Is there a motion to approve the April 20th, 2021 minutes?
So moved. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
And finally, is there a motion to approve the June 1st, 2021 minutes?
So moved. Second. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. All right, now we'll move on to the Commissioner's report. Commissioner Piper?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I apologize for my appearance. The rain messed up my hair today. Thank you. I know we've got a lot, so I'll keep my comments brief. Most of what I would update you on, you're going to get presented today in one form or another. There is a lot going on in the department, as you well know, so I'm excited to share all of this, and I just want to personally thank the individuals on staff who have worked very hard, along with their regular jobs, to prepare for this meeting. So it's going to be a lot of information, but a lot of good things happening in the Commonwealth related to elections. I did want to take a moment to recognize some new staff. So first of all, I, like the chairman, am very excited to see all of your faces and to actually be able to meet in person. And I, like the chairman, have a very sore neck from wearing this tie for just 15 minutes. So, but I want to take a moment to introduce staff members. We have several new individuals since the beginning of the year, and starting with our Information Services Division, I don't see her, but Lizzie Johnson is our User Experience, User Interface Developer. She's attending online, I'm sure. Larry D'Arcangelo has been with us as a quality assurance contractor for a couple of years. He has been brought on full-time as our quality assurance supervisor. Karen Hoyt-Stewart, who you will hear from later today, has been with us in a contractor role, but she's now full-time voting equipment coordinator. She's got a big job in front of her, which you'll see later this afternoon, but very happy to have her on board and her experience. She also comes from York County, Pennsylvania, former clerk there, and my father lived in York. So we've got that in common. But great to have her on board. Just starting last week, Ruth Hancock is our new data architect. I'm glad to have her on board, working in list maintenance areas and a number of other areas. And also, Scott Rose has been brought on as our senior software developer in information services. We added an additional position for training this year, and Sarah Daly, who's there in the back with us, joined us a couple of months ago, and she's relocating from North Carolina, right? But where in North Carolina? Emerald Isle. So, and I spent my vacation there last year, so very good. Small world, but Sarah's doing great work. She's coming on board. We'll talk about the GR certification process a little bit later today as well. As our a new registrar liaison, for those who are not aware, Keith Ballmer, who was with us for a number of years, has accepted the position as general registrar in the city of Richmond. So we're excited for him, and brought on John Cronin, who is back there in the back. John was actually with us in the Virginia Management Fellows program, which is you were the second cohort, correct? So that's a program that's been started up under this administration to bring really young, talented people into Virginia state government. John served with us for 8 months, from February to October of last year. So he unfortunately left right before the election, but then he went to a different cohort, and we were lucky enough to have him apply and accept the job as our registrar liaison. In our business office, we have Yolanda Andrews, who is our senior office administrator back there in the back. She is the face you see when we walk into the office, and she's been doing a great job of getting up to speed, so welcome to Yolanda as well. Also, in policy, I think I've introduced her, but I'm going to introduce her again. Rachel Lawless was appointed by the governor on March 1st. To be our confidential policy assistant. She's been working with the policy team, and you'll hear from her a little bit later as well. Ashley Coles was brought in as our policy analyst recently. She's our FOIA officer, so I know you board members have already been in touch with her on a couple of different things. Also want to take an opportunity to introduce our legal interns for the summer. They are doing a lot of great work on some reports that the General Assembly has asked us to prepare. Javon Davis from Boston College, he's obviously in Boston, so he's not here today, but he is attending online. And Maxfield Daly Watson, who is they're both rising 2Ls, by the way. And Maxfield is at the William & Mary, which again, my son is going to William & Mary in the fall, so I just want to put in that plug that he's doing that. So Maxfield has agreed to show him around, so that's good. I also want to take a second to introduce an intern that's coming from us. He was with the Rising Sophomore at Wake Forest, and he's back there in the back, Andrew Cotter. Andrew expressed an interest in the department back in the late December, early December timeframe during the winter break. We brought him in. His passion for elections, I'll talk about in just a second, was so great. We were able to bring him back in, and he discovered some election results paperwork from like 1926 and 1930 and way back when. So they've been uncovering some pretty amazing stuff that we apparently had in files for a very long time. So it's very good that he's been able to be there. His last day will be Friday, but I have a feeling we'll see Andrew again. Also with us today, we have Ashley Scott, who is the Governor's Fellow Ashley is the Governor's Fellow for the Governor's Policy team, and Whitney Brown is the Governor's Fellow for the Secretary of Administration. I got to meet with them today. Again, very excited young people who are interested in public service. So lots of new faces. But before I get to my little speech here, I wanted to introduce DJ Tiger, who you'll see up front here. DJ is our Director of Operations. We had talked about this position in the past. I'm going to talk a lot about reorganization later today, and But DJ's been with us, she said, 7 weeks today?
6 weeks and 2 days.
6 weeks and 2 days. But I'm disappointed because she still has her hair, so she must not be working hard enough. It's getting grayer, for those that didn't hear. But DJ has done an excellent job coming in and getting both feet wet and learning about everything that we're doing here. But she comes from us from the SCC, and prior to that, she was with the Indigenous Defense Commission, where she had a very similar role and did great work there. So we're real excited to have her on board. She is, again, she's already become a great partner of mine, and we're getting lots of good things done. I'll talk more about that later on. But I want to point out, there are several people here. I mentioned Andrew and our governor's fellow, and John as well, and then Conrad. Is Conrad here? Conrad. Sorry, Conrad, I apologize. What is your last name? Conrad Faya? Yeah. Okay, so Conrad is a new cohort with the Virginia Management Fellows Program. I apologize, it wasn't on the list, but I'm glad I remembered. So he is coming and is working with us as well, and doing some great work helping out the election administration team. But I point this out because I think that this is the key to some of the stories that we've seen and the misinformation that we see regarding elections. Bringing young folks like this who clearly have a passion for elections and for public service is exactly what we need to be doing. So I'm excited that the Department of Elections has been able to bring these folks on board because they're getting to see all that goes into an election. And I was telling the fellows this morning, I actually talked to a guy this morning who said, "Oh, I saw you on TV just before the election." And he said, "So is what you do a part-time gig just around the election?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's part-time because we have an election all the time." But I had a good laugh about that. That's not the first time I've been asked that kind of a question. So a lot of what we see out there, the confusion or the mis and disinformation is based on the fact that people don't understand all that we do to put on an election. And bringing young people in here to see all that goes into putting on an election is going to be the key for the future of elections and election administration in this country. And then I will be going on a voter education campaign that I'll outline in more detail later on about how the department is really going to attack this issue. There seems to be some misinformation about how we process ballots and how we count ballots. Contrary to some people's opinions, we don't just show up in the office and find 10,000 ballots and run them through a machine. There's a process that we follow, and it's very, very labor intensive. It's also got a lot of checks and balances. So I just wanted to point out these 5 young people that we've been lucky enough to have join us in our agency, because I think it's really important for the future of elections in Virginia and in the country. So I'll be detailing a voter education plan over the next couple of months in our next few board meetings to discuss how we're going to attack this very pressing issue in front of us. I also wanted to point out that, not tooting my own horn, but Virginia does represent on the board of the National Association of State Election Directors. We are the South Region representative. I was recently elected the vice chairman of ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center. That is our list sharing consortium. We share our voter registration list with 30 states and the District of Columbia to ensure that when somebody has moved, they've moved to another state, that we get that information so that we can follow up and remove those from our roles if they had not yet informed us. ERIC has been Virginia's founding member, and it's exciting to be in a leadership role with ERIC. And then just last week, Virginia was elected to the Executive Committee of the Election Assistance Commission's Standards Board. So we'll be in a leadership role there as well. So it's exciting to see Virginia leading in so many different areas. And just so you know, that's NASED, ERIC, and EAC. DJ has been getting the quiz on all the different acronyms that we have. Last but not least, you'll be seeing we have on the agenda, and it's request for an extension. If you'll remember, the General Assembly last year passed a law requiring the state board to create a certification for general registrars. And the requirement is that within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment, they have to take the certification class, and then they have to meet certain electives throughout the remaining years. The first of those expires on June 30th of this year, and so we did send out a notification to the registrars and their electoral boards who had not completed that GR certification to date. The reason that's important is because the law states very clearly that if they do not get certified, they cannot be registrar as of July 1st. We currently have, I think, 9, Appomattox County, Chesterfield, Colonial Heights, Boyd, Greene County, Highland County, James City County, Norfolk, and Smith County who have not completed. We do have one extension being requested today, and that will be on the agenda later. But it's critical that we get those certifications completed. I have taken the class and passed, but that was a long time ago, I think. So. But anyway, and we encourage. I know you all approved these standards for the certification, but it's I think a very good thing that we've been able to put together. And praise to the training team for how awesome it is and how easy it is to use. But hopefully we'll get them all taken care of by June 30th, and we'll have a full slate of certified general registrars for the State Board of Election standards. And I went on way longer than I thought I would, but that's always the case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take the questions the board might have.
Thank you, Commissioner Piper. Do either other members of the board have any questions? Okay. I'd like, on behalf of the board, I'd like to extend a welcome to all of the myriad new employees that the commissioner introduced. I think that it's clear that you're joining what is one of the preeminent election administration operations among all of the states, and I think that you will come to appreciate, as the members of the board have over the past 2 years, the professionalism and dedication of the staff of the department. So welcome, and I hope you'll find your time here enjoyable. The next item on our agenda is the certification of the primary election of June 8, 2021. There were 3 statewide offices filled in the Democratic primary, 18 House of Delegates seats in the Democratic primary, and 7 Republican seats in the Republican primary. Mr. Saunders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Upon completion of the primary elections on June 8th, local general registrars entered all relevant election data into our SVRS system. In accordance with Virginia Code, within 6 days after the election, local electoral boards conduct provisional ballot meetings and canvasses to ascertain and certify election results for their locality. Upon completion of canvass, the GRs forwarded their locality certified abstracts of votes to elect. To ensure accuracy of those results, elect staff perform the procedures below, or that I will outline. Staff worked with localities to resolve and/or explain any issues that we identified. We confirmed all required abstracts were properly completed and submitted, compared turnout to votes cast, and compared results listed in the abstract to the results entered in SVRS. Elect staff's recommendation is that the board vote to certify the results of the June 8, 2021 Democratic and Republican primaries as presented, and declare the winners of each primary to be that party's nominee for the November 2nd general election. I suggest that the motion has been included in the board's working papers, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Do members of the board have any questions or comments? Could staff tell us if any member of the public has expressed an interest in commenting on this item? Very good. In that event, I will entertain a motion to certify the results. Mr. Chairman, if you would.
I move the board certify the results of the June 8th, 2021 Democratic and Republican primary elections as presented, and declare the winners of each primary to be that party's nominee for the second 2021 general election.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board accept, certify the results of the June 8, 2021 Democratic and Republican primary elections. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Next up is certification of voting systems. We have 5 different voting systems to be certified today. Ms. Hoyt-Stewart, walk us through.
Yes, we're going to start off with the first one to request, and that was election systems and software. They're requesting, we've provided you all your materials. We have a certification letter from the BISTL, the SLI compliance, our BISTL, who certifies it. We have a letter from each of the counties that did a mock election, and then we have the memo. The background is that election systems and software presented their request on January 27th to us. They provided all the technical data package and the corporate information that's required under Step 2 on the requirements and procedures, and both of the submissions were deemed complete and sufficient to detail to warrant the next step, the preliminary review. During the preliminary review, the state designated evaluation agent, which we have, our BISTL is SLI, conducted a preliminary analysis of the technical data package and other materials and provided and prepared test assertions. Election systems and software provided the certification fee, and the testing evaluation was conducted on March 8th through March 12th, 2021, at our Virginia offices. In addition, the voting system was successfully tested in a mock election in Chesterfield County, and that letter is attached, on April 6th, 2021. Election systems and software voting systems presented for certification under 6.1.10 successfully and completed the Virginia voting system certification requirement. You need to make a motion.
Dr. O'Bannon?
So these are the 5 different systems that are used in the Commonwealth.
There's 4 voting systems and their certifications will end July of 2021. Their current system certification. So they had to get certified by July 2021 in order to continue to be sold and operated in Virginia. Now, we the elect has pushed out all the localities can have until July of 2022 to upgrade to this new certified version, because it's almost impossible for them all to be upgraded in this next 6 months, almost impossible. So we pushed that out till July of 2022. But all 4 voting machine vendors have come back and requested certification and have gone through the whole process.
That's ENS software, Unisys, ARC,
And Dominion.
and roughly how many of the 133 local subdivisions have those? Do you have an idea, roughly?
Well, the most, is like, I know it by machine number. I know ES&S has 3,604, and Unison has about 1,534, something like that. And Hart has 900 some, and Dominion has around 900, 800 and some.
Thank you.
So,
Any additional comments or questions? Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? All right, in that event, I'll entertain a motion that the electronic systems and software voting machines be certified.
I move that the board certify the use of election systems and software voting system version 6.1.1.0 in elections in the Commonwealth of Virginia pursuant to the state certification of voting systems requirements and procedures.
It's moved and seconded that the board certify the use of electronic systems and software voting system. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Ms. Hoyt-Stewart?
Okay, the second vendor to bring in request certification, they requested it on March 19th, and it's Unison Voting Systems. And those, like I say, they have a pretty good sum. The Unison system, we provided you the certification letter. It's 2.1.1. That's, .1 was added because they had to add a specific requirement that we requested alone. So their EAC certification is 2.1, but for us, it's 2.1.1, because we requested they make a change. So following the steps, after they initiated the certification on March 19th, they provided their technical data package and their corporate information required under Step 2, and then both of the submissions were deemed complete and sufficient to warrant Step number 3. During the preliminary review, the state designated evaluation agent, which is SLI, conducted a preliminary analysis of their technical data package and other materials and prepared their test assertions. And the test assertions are done specifically to the model numbers of each vendor. So those had to be adapted for each vendor. So that's why I'm reiterating that test assertion for each one. Unison provided their certification fee, and the testing evaluation was done March 23rd through March 24th here in Virginia, and they successfully tested a mock election in Arlington County on April 27th. The Unison voting system presented for certification under 2.1.1 successfully completed a Virginia voting system certification requirement.
Does the board have any questions or comments? Has any member of the public expressed interest in commenting on this item? All right, in that event, I'll entertain a motion that the board certify the use of Unison voting solution voting system.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board certify the use of Unison voting solutions voting system, version 2.1.1.1, in elections to Commonwealth of Virginia, pursuant to the state certification of voting systems requirements as proceeded.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Ms. Hoy-Stewart?
The third vendor to come forward to request certification is the Hart Intercivic of Verity Voting, 2.5.1 certification. Again, 2.5 is their EA certification. Their one for us is 2.5.1 because they had to make a change to accommodate our certification law. They requested certification on February 23rd. They provided their technical data package and their corporate information as required under Step 2. Both these submissions were deemed complete and sufficient to warrant going into Step 3. During the preliminary review, the state designated evaluation agent conducted a preliminary analysis of the technical data package and other materials provided and prepared test assertions. Hart Intercivic provided the certification fee, and the testing and evaluation was conducted on March 23rd or 29th through April 1st and here in elect. They successfully completed their mock election in Essex County on May 7th, 2021. The Hart Intercivic voting system presented for certification under 2.5.1 successfully completed the Virginia voting system certification requirement.
Thank you. Do members of the board have any questions or comments? Has any member of the public said that they wish to comment on this? In that event, I'll entertain a motion that the board certify the use of Hart Intercivic Verity voting system.
I move that the board certify the use of Hart Intercivic Verity voting system, version 2.5.1, in elections in the Commonwealth of Virginia, pursuant to the state certification of voting systems requirements and procedures.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board certify the use of Hart Intercivic Verity voting system. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
The last voting system vendor to come forward and request certification is Dominion. Voting is 5.5C, and the certification letter was provided by the SLI compliance fiscal. They requested certification on April 16th, 2021. They provided their technical data package, their corporate information, everything required under Step 2, and both of these submissions were deemed complete and in sufficient detail to warrant Step number 3. The evaluation agent conducted a preliminary analysis of the technical data package and other materials provided and provided test assertions. Dominion provided the certification fee, and the testing evaluation was successfully tested in a mock election in Amelia County on June 1st, 2021. The Dominion voting system presented for certification under 5-5.C is successfully completed Virginia voting system certification requirements.
Thank you. Members of the board have any questions or comments?
So we farm out this work of certifying these people to a third party, SLI.
Yes, LI, which is a VISL, a voting systems technology, or test laboratory. And, the EAC also certifies them, okay? So they're certified by the EAC,
What's that?
Election Assistance Commission, the federal.
That's the federal.
Federal. They certify the VISL, and then the VISLs come and help us certify that, yes, we met all the standards, they met all the standards.
And why does this one get a C instead of a 1?
Because that's how they name everyone. They actually went through an A, B, and C, so C is their third rendition of the 5.5. So it's how their companies designate their numbers.
As opposed to .3?
Yeah, that's .1, .2, .3, yeah.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? Does any member of the public, indicate they wish to speak?
Right, Mr. Chairman.
First,
Sorry, I just want to point out, this is the testing certification standards in Virginia are a model for the rest of the country, and I didn't do anything. It was the staff that did it, so I'm going to vote for them. We have some of the most stringent standards in the country. We have upgraded in a time when other states have been hesitant to because, as she mentioned, EAC and the voting system, voluntary voting system guidelines, they just approved 2.0. They're still years from going into effect, but Virginia is ahead of the game. So I think that one of the great things about this, I mean, just to point out a couple of things, meeting some DoD standards for this equipment, and secondly, the work that we do about understanding what the corporation and where they come from and who they are. That's a step in the right direction that we looked at for, prior to 2020 when we were talking about being concerned about a foreign entity being involved in our voting system. Anyway, I just want to point out that this is we've taken a real leap forward for voting systems, and Virginia can be confident that our systems are meeting the strictest standards.
thank you, Commissioner Piper. If there are no additional comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the Dominion system.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board certify the use of the Dominion voting system version 5.5-C in elections of the Commonwealth of Virginia pursuant to the state certification of voting systems requirements and procedures.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of certifying the Dominion voting system will say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. And finally, we have the Robus electronic.
Yes, this is actually the third electronic poll book vendor who's come in to be certified. Before we had No Ink in May 25th, and we had Dimtech in September 15th, and now Robus is coming in, to get certified to their 3.4.139.0. So, just so you know. So their letter was submitted, and they, on June the 2nd is when they requested, certification. They provided their technical data package and corporate information. That's required under step 2. They then both submitted, both submissions were complete and sufficient detail to move to step 3. During the preliminary review, the state designated agent, SLI, conducted a preliminary analysis of the technical data package and other materials provided and prepared test assertions. Robus provided the certification fee, and the testing evaluation was conducted on June 8th. Poll books just take 1 day, so we're good on that. And it was done here in Virginia. We had a successful mock election held in Montgomery County on June 15th. 2021, which is why the materials were a little late, Commissioner, or Chairman. The Robust Election Electronic Poll Book presented for certification is under 3.4.139.0. Successfully completed the Virginia Electronic Poll Book state certification requirement.
All right. I think what EAC needs to do more than anything else is to synchronize the numbers of these systems, so that they use one common nomenclature.
Technically, they do in the sense like a big number. Like, for example, Dominion was 4.14-E before. Now they're 5.5C. So I know that that's a major step from 4 point to 5 point. Same thing with ES&S, went from 502 at 6040 to 6110. So it's sort of, it's a way they keep track of what changes they made and what revisions. But the big number, the first number is the big one. That's the one that tells you where it's going.
I'll keep that in mind going forward.
Yeah.
All right, do other members of the board have any questions or comments? Has any member of the public signified they wish to speak on this item? All right, in that event, I'll entertain a motion that the board certify the use of Robust Elections electronic poll books.
I move that the board certify the use of Robust Elections electronic poll books, version 3.4.139.0, and elections in the Commonwealth of Virginia pursuant to the state certification of electronic poll books requirements and procedures.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the board certify the use of Robust electronic poll books. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Wakester.
Well, I just have one more thing to add to you.
All right.
This is more information, but according to the state standards, any certification that has not been brought forward by July 2021 expires. So I wanted to note for the record that we, that we have three, I don't know how to say it. They're not systems, they're parts, three models or that are expiring. Their certification expires. They'll no longer be able to operate or be sold in Virginia because the vendors did not bring them forward, okay, to be tested. And those are election systems and softwares, voter assistance terminal, Automark, hardware 1.0, 1.1, and 1.3. Firmware was 1.8.6.0, and that will be expired. Just means that they will go to Express Vote instead of Automark technology. The two electronic voting systems or poll books are also expiring. VR systems, EVID, electronic poll book version 2012.21.106, and election systems and softwares, Express Poll 5000, electronic poll book version 3.2.0.0. So those three certifications will expire as of July 31st, 2021.
Okay, are the vendors aware of the
They are aware and they made
expiration?
a decision. Now, ES&S is planning to bring in a new poll book in August, so I'll probably be bringing that forward in August, September for certification, once they apply and go through. And as far as, like I said, the Automark is old technology, and it's also not for our quarter. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the statewide voter registration system request for proposal update. Ms. Gilstrap?
Yes, I'm here. Are you able to hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right, presenting my screen. Is everybody able to hear me and see the screen?
We could gain a little sound if possible.
I'm sorry?
I'm just looking for a little volume, and the commission's going to supply it.
Gail, can you try it? Is that good?
I've got mine all the way up.
Yeah, we,
Is that better?
on this end, so we're set.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. We'll jump right in here based on our time here. All right. So I'm gonna briefly introduce the team. Then we'll do a recap of the RFP project background, touch base on some RFP 101 items. We'll briefly discuss the project methodology that was used, as well as some I'm sorry?
You're fine.
Are you still able to hear me? Okay. We'll briefly touch on some opportunities and challenges that were identified, and then we'll go through the RFP from posting to the award, finally to the execution. All right, so the project team consists of, from elect, Gary Finch, the governance manager. He's our RFP single point of contact, which I will explain a little bit more about in a minute. Wendy Mott is our product manager. Georgiana Ball is the technical writer on the team. Wiley Rousey is the procurement specialist that we have, and I am Gail Gilstrap. I am the project manager for the RFP project. In addition, we had locality mentors, state liaisons, and other stakeholders supporting us in reviews, providing input throughout the process. And we also had input and reviews from VITA and OAG, and I can explain where they came in here in a few slides. All right, so real quick, a recap on why we're looking at a new, which I'll refer to now as the SVRS. Obviously, VERIS is aging. It was implemented back in 2007. So with the ever-changing election environment, we needed to look at a more secure, modern solution to support those changes and performance demands, which includes some additional workflow management capability to help maintain the changing environment. And finally, looking at a cloud solution, which will help reduce the costs for elect in ownership. All right, so RFP 101, just some quick highlights from this. The RFP is considered a high-risk procurement. I'll explain that here again, a little bit more detail. We adhered to VITA's RFP template and the procurement policies. During the process, we have restricted contact as well as RFP information sharing with the vendors and others. The vendors, during the RFP, the vendors were asked how are they going to meet the RFP or elect's needs as well as the requirements in the proposals that they're submitting, which includes pricing detail. All of this is going to go through a very detailed evaluation process, which is currently underway. The award is going to be based on the overall proposal. It's not going to be based solely on the price, which is why we're following this process. Prior to award, everything is going to go public. Therefore, everything that we're collecting right now is FOIable. So we're making sure that any communications, notes, they are adhering to procurement policies to ensure that we have minimal opportunity for vendors to protest or appeal an award at the end. The guidance that we're given, expanding a little bit more on the procurement law and policy, is conversations about or sharing RFP information internally or outside the organization must be limited to to the individual's participation in the RFP process, and it still needs to be limited to anything that is publicly posted out there on the EVA site. So the guidance that has been given is do not talk to the potential vendors. If they reach out for questions via phone, email, what have you, or if someone approaches you, regardless, when in doubt, say nothing and guide them to the RFP single point of contact Gary Finch has mentioned previously for any and all questions. We have a SVRS Info Hub email box that we're taking in all questions, concerns around the RFP process to ensure that we're following the procurement law and policy. All right, so I mentioned high-risk procurement and what's involved. So any contract with cost over $10 million over the internal or initial term of the contract. it makes it a high-risk procurement. So with this high-risk procurement, we have additional reviews by OAG and VITA. They reviewed the RFP before it was posted publicly. They will also review prior to the award of any contract. Any contract administrator following that is going to need to adhere to additional VITA guidelines as well, which includes reporting that's going to be publicly posted along contract performance, values and contract expenditures, cure letters, formal complaints, etc. The methodology and opportunities here. The methodology that we used was a collaborative approach between state and locality stakeholders to ensure that we had transparency. We wanted active participation. We had them involved with the reviews and obviously continuing ongoing input. We developed all the requirements from the ground up with the help with the elect liaisons with the localities that helped us to recruit mentors from each of the 7 geographic regions. And this was also to make sure that while we did have VERIS, we wanted to improve upon the existing processes and create potentially creating new processes and increasing our ability to adapt to the changing environment of elections. So some opportunities that we saw here or that we've identified is, reducing those silos, bringing everybody involved. Building that communication, providing the updates out to anybody and everybody who wanted to know what was going on with SVRS. It's going to provide elect with a fresh start, so to speak. It's going to be a modern, secure solution. We want to be innovative here. So that was the intent of making sure that we had all involvement along the way. Some challenges, obviously, there's a lot going on within elect. You've got the elections, you've got other projects. So investment in people and time is a high priority to elect, but this is also going to be a multiple year project, which also is a high priority to elect. So we've got to be cognizant of that and work around that, which we have been doing. Continue that communication across the organization. However, we still need to maintain, restrict those discussions to ensure that procurement policy is not impacted and that we don't have any potential award issues with the award. We certainly don't want a VERIS 2.0. So one of the bigger challenges that we're going to have here coming up, which we're already looking towards, is we're going to end up having VERIS running in parallel with the new SVRS for a period of time, a couple of elections at least, to ensure that we've captured everything, we can address any issues that we might see. So we'll have them in parallel for a period of time, which is also going to take additional time and commitment from resources. All right, so going forward, this is a quick milestone activity chart of where we're at. So obviously we've completed all the way through May 17th, which is when the proposals were due. Currently, we're in the evaluation process with the evaluation team, so which is coming up towards the end of that before we go into kind of a team consensus scoring and then into the demonstrations. And I'll expand upon each of these remaining items here in a moment. All right, so what's in progress, as I mentioned, is we've got 4 evaluation teams, roughly about 3 to 5 participants per team. We've identified the 4 are functional, technical, financial and SWAM, and legal and policy. So these teams are currently evaluating the proposals that have come into elect for the new SVRS solution. Prior to this, to give them the for scoring these proposals, we weighted the criteria between 1 and 10. We posted that publicly. The team members have that to support their scoring of the proposals. And we reviewed all the proposals for completeness when they came in before handing off to each team to work through. All right, so each team is going to review their designated areas based on the 4 that we identified. Top vendors are going to be brought in to present or prepare a demonstration, present their solution to us based on the RFP that was submitted and the proposal that they responded with. In order to move forward, we need to have at least 2 vendors demonstrate. So we have to, again, this is with procurement, policy, and law, we'll have 2 vendors moving forward from demonstrations into negotiations. So negotiations, once we've seen the demonstrations, we'll jump into that area. Could go back and forth many, many times. Could go where maybe a party might withdraw from consideration based on the fact they can't meet certain requirements, or elect chooses to reject any of those proposals and resolicit. So everything's on the table, including price, with the exception of many of the T's and C's that cannot be changed. All right, so the feature is we're going to be running the systems in parallel. We're going to be looking to implement the MVP of SVRS. So once we do get through all of the evaluations, the demonstrations, and come to a contract agreement, we're going to determine what that MVP is going to be. That's going to, while we run in parallel with VERIS before we actually fully release the SVRS solution. And that is what I have for you today. And I will stop sharing for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gilstrap. Do members of the board have any questions or comments?
I just have a question. Where in this process are we going to have our attorneys review these contracts? And this is a historical question. 2006, we decided it was the format is IP to Northrop Grumman. And fast forward, that was a very painful divorce because Grumman had very good lawyers. Those contracts were...
I'm sorry, can I stop you there for a minute? We're having a very hard time hearing you.
I'll repeat the question.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give Gail a chance to answer, but essentially, Gail.
It's just that I think it's important in something this big that we have, no disrespect to our lawyers. But this is a specific area of the law. It would be really good to get good advice when we get in.
Yeah, so Gail, can you talk about who is involved in the negotiations with regard to the vendor from our side, who we'll be working with to ensure that we are dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's when it comes to negotiations and final contract.
Protecting our side of the negotiation.
Right.
Yeah, we're actually preparing a training right now for a negotiation so that we can review that with the elect stakeholders. What we'll need from elect is to ensure that who is going to be the negotiation lead understands SVRS, understands all of the needs around the solution, understands the requirements. Maybe somebody who has been involved with negotiations before to come to the table, be that lead and help guide elect through the negotiations with the vendor. So we'll want to come to the table with prepared questions or concerns around what was identified through the evaluation process, to come to the table with those highest risk items first, navigate through those with the vendors, because they're obviously going to come prepared to the table, and try to get through those and ultimately decide, okay, what do we need to table? What can we live? What do we need to be flexible on? Or can we even be flexible on certain things and determine, do we stay at the table or do we just, separate and say, this is not going to work? So we are going to be reaching out to elect with that training and identifying the individual or individuals that do need to be involved.
But I think too, Gail, before we finalize the contract, it'll need to be reviewed definitely by the Office of the Attorney General, who has these procurement specialists. So I understand, and I understand your concern. I'd like to, maybe you and I can discuss.
So it's an opportunity to threat, but it's important that we have good legal advice to take these contracts.
Right, and I appreciate that, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I'll let you and I talk so I can hammer down some more of your concerns. But I would also point out, there were several of us, Wendy Mott, who was on the team, who were involved in the original VERIS 1.0. And we are well aware of some of the pitfalls that we fell into there. We also have an advantage around the country have recently implemented large systems like this. When we did SVRS back in 2000, it started really in 2004, 2005, this was still a very brand new industry. So there's lots that have been learned, but I hear your concerns, and certainly we don't want a repeat of that. So I would love to speak with you about this concern, and we'll make sure we can address those.
And I think what you were starting to allude to, Commissioner, is before any award is made, OAG and VITA do need to review everything before that award is signed off on. So they will be supporting us as well.
Additional comments, questions? Ms. Gilstrap, I'm particularly sensitive to one of the challenges you listed, which is that this not be SVRS 2.0. A couple of weeks ago, I made the mistake of referring to that way with the commissioner, and was disabused of the notion. My concern is about additional capabilities of the system and whether or not the RFP will provide for a number of different filings we have, including campaign finance, the other kinds of reports and certifications that the board has become familiar with over the past year or so. Will the RFP be flexible enough to provide that capability?
We have captured many of those requirements, and we are happy to send them over and share them with you. I will say is right now, going into negotiations, we can take in what we have in the RFP and the proposal. Once we get into negotiations, if there is something that is not identified, we can bring new functionality to the table. But we just have to remember and be cognizant of it. Obviously it could cost more. It could take more time to implement. But we do have those requirements, and I'm more than happy to share those with you, or you can grab them out on VITA if you'd prefer.
Okay, I appreciate that. The other thing that I was thinking is, and this stemmed from spending a good deal of time with 24.2 over the past couple of days, looking at the delegations of authority. Whatever is implemented is going to require a number of amendments to the code. So as it goes forward, I assume that you'll be, not so much you as the commissioner and the department will be working with the General Assembly to make sure that the code requirements conform to the new system.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond. So the idea initially is to make sure that the system conforms with code. But as she mentioned in her presentation, the goal of the system is adaptability. And so to Gail's point, even if some of those things that we would, nice to have, may not be accessible at the beginning, the idea is to have a system that we can quickly adapt and make updates and changes to. This is a system that we obviously are not going to, toss. It's not a lease. We don't take it back after 3 years and train it up for a new model. So this is something that's going to be around for a while. We want to make sure that it is adaptable and it's easily adaptable. So that's the key to here. I would point out campaign finance. This is we have a great system for campaign finance, but we'll go from there.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions from the board? Has any member of the public indicated interest in speaking to this item? All right. In that event, thank you, Ms. Gilstrap, for a great presentation. We know a good deal more about SVRS than we did a half hour ago, so we appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for your time.
All right, the next item on our agenda is ranked choice voting regulations and supporting documents. Buckley?
Hello, board members. My name is Samantha. and I am policy analyst with the Department of Elections. Before you is a draft proposal of ranked choice voting regulations and ballot standards. I will not be reading all 51 pages to you, so. So essentially, in 2020, the General Assembly passed two bills, HB 1113 and HB 506, each which established ranked choice voting, specifically for members of County Board of Supervisors and City Council. So this is more of a local bill, but it also impacts us because the Department of Elections, well, the State Board of Elections, may promulgate rules and procedures related to the administration of ranked choice voting elections. So essentially what I've done, or what the department has done, has created regulations relating to that. In creating these regulations, actually, first, let me go back. Ranked choice voting, just to remind you guys, is a method of voting which permits voters to rank their preference of candidates. So instead of just choosing one candidate for a seat, you can choose your first choice, your second choice, or your third choice, and so on. Let's say that this is a single seat office. If your first choice if your first choice is eliminated, then instead of your ballot just kind of being done, you'd be able to go to your second choice, and we'd be able to look at it as well. If it was a multi-seat office, we are permitted or actually required to do single transferable votes, which is more of a reallocation of votes. What that means is if it's a multi-seat office and your person wins, then instead of your ballot kind of being done, if you chose the winner as your first choice, then that winner, instead of them getting more votes, your vote would be reallocated and fractionally given to other members, to other candidates. So, in making these regulations, we sought insight from third-party groups such as FairVote, GRs from other states that already conduct ranked choice voting, and also the Center for Civic Design. Now, are there any questions first about generally? No. Okay, great. Oh, yes.
Rodano?
I guess this is more of a procedural question. We're doing this in response to the legislation, but the proposal for us today is to approve these to put out for public comment as part of the regulatory process.
Yes, so essentially, normally, because this is about voting, normally you kind of just adopt and we're done. This time around, because it is a new form of voting, the department is proposing that we put this up for public comment, to receive public comment and then bring forward to the board again later on.
That was the magic word. So we're not constrained by any timelines in the bill. We have to do this by July 1st, obviously. So you're basically bringing this proposal forward, which you all worked up for us to put out for public comment. We'll hear from the public, and then we'll come back to hear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions?
Following on that, what will be the length of the public comment period?
It's going to be 21 days. That's what we have in our regulations, in our own regulations about public comment. So it's going to be 21 days, unless the board would like it to be longer. Any other questions? Okay. So there's that. One of the things that we do need to discuss is about ranking limitations. Ranking limitations, what that means is, let's say that there are 10 candidates running for a seat. Do we want to limit how many people the voter can rank, or have an unlimited ranking? Essentially, right now, from what we know, we do have some limitations. Well, some of the vendors have ranking limitations. It looks like Unisys is 3 rankings, Heart is 6 rankings, Dominion is 10, and ESNS is 21 rankings. The regulations, as they are proposed right now, there is no ranking limitation. But we want to bring it to the board to make that decision of whether or not to have ranking limitations and also the number if the board wanted to be. Is that better? Okay.
This is an interesting question about how the limitation plays off against certification of these systems. Because if we're going to impose a requirement of 3, 10, or 21, then we're going to have to go back to the vendors and make this a requirement of certification, correct?
Yes. So as of right now, Unisys has the lowest number, it's 3. The other ones are higher. And so from what I understand, likely it would be a change in their software if we said that, oh, no, you can rank up to 5, up to 10. So most likely, yes, some of them may need to come back. However, also, I mean, they've also been able to do this for a while as well.
Chairman,
Dr. Van.
I'll ask the dumb question, is limiting the number of candidates in this fashion constitutional?
If you mean, well, I mean, other than
Fair or substitute fair or legal?
Look to your left.
So just to give an idea, we did do some research on other states that do ranked choice voting, and it looks like a lot of them do limit the ranking. It looks like most of them limit at 10. There is one that has no limit. So yeah, it looks like limiting is something that states do have. Obviously, of course, you don't have to limit. That is up to the board as well.
I don't want to prolong this, but what would be the basis on which a board would make that limitation? Filing date or, enough said.
It's an interesting question, and also, when you have multiple seats to be filled and ranked choice voting, that should increase the number of candidates that you can have, shouldn't it? You have a vote for it.
Depends on what the board wants.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's a seat of 3, if the board just wants to have 5 or 10, then it would still be a 1, 2, 3 ranking, or however many. If you're wondering, well, how does that impact the reallocation mode or method, that takes care of the multi-seat question. I mean, it honestly depends on what the board wants to do.
Okay. And most important, this is a decision we don't have to make today, correct?
No, of course not.
All right, thank you.
But yeah, so essentially that is for the regs. The regs, just to let you guys know, the rundown. The regulations themselves go through definitions, administration, ballot treatment, also the reallocation method, how paper ballots it should be handled, election results requirements, as in posting and publishing of the election results, and also outreach or voter education. Any questions about the regulations themselves? No? Okay. Also a part of this is the ranked choice voting ballot standards. As you know, we already have ballot standards. We have to make changes for ranked choice voting. This is also being put up for public comment. For the ranked choice voting ballot standards, this was also brought before our GRs to get their ideas and insight on there. We try to, because of the way the code is written, we definitely made sure that the ballot standards complied with the code, while also trying to make a ballot that would be functional for a voter. So, but yes, if you would like a motion for public comment.
Well, most important question, this is what members of the General Assembly used to call home cooking. The one jurisdiction under the county manager plan is my home county of Arlington. They would be subject to all the requirements and specifications of whatever is determined through the regulatory process.
That is true, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm from, also county manager. County.
No, but you're not a planner. You're a form.
But no, this is at the discretion of the governing body of that locality.
Yes, it must be voted on by majority. And also, the current interpretation is that, at least in the regulations as proposed, is that the locality that chooses to do this, votes for it, they must specify which election it is for. And so it is not continuing. They would have to basically re-vote for it again.
On an election by election basis.
Yes, yes.
Additional questions, comments? Has any member of the public indicated interest in speaking to this item? Very good.
Mr. Chairman, in the absence of any public comment, I move the board approve to put forward for public comment the department's proposal for ranked choice voting regulations and ballot.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve to put forward for public comment the department's proposal for ranked choice voting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Buck. The next item, the next considerable item, is delegations of authority. Ms. Lawless and Ms. Cole will walk us through the several hundred pages that they presented us to review.
We apologize in advance.
It's not your fault.
Well, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you for having Ashley and I to talk about the delegation of authority.
Excuse me 1 second. Ladies, do you mind speaking up a little louder, because the microphone is not necessarily picking up as well as we'd like it to.
Sure.
I apologize for interrupting.
The current version of the delegations of authority was adopted in 2019 with one revision in March 2021. Since 2019, adoption of the delegations, the General Assembly has enacted many additions, deletions, and amendments to Virginia election law. The documents included in your working papers reflect needed revisions from the 2020 and 2021 legislative sessions. Included with this packet are supporting memos for each chapter of Title 24.2 and the applicable chapter, Title 15.2, which Ashley Cole and myself will be highlighting for you today. Memo of administrative form, the board has previously delegated. Current delegation of authority, proposed delegation of authority for 2021, a change log which shows corrections from prior versions of the delegation of authority. Ashley will begin with a highlight of the revisions, starting with Chapter 1.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to read every code provision to you.
Thank you.
But we would like to highlight, so for Chapter 1, which deals with general provisions and administration, there are 2 code provisions that we are recommending are delegated to the Department of Elections. They deal with administrative aspects of voting and election materials in languages other than English. Beyond those 2 code provisions, there are 5 code provisions we recommend are retained by the board, and 4 code provisions that just require language updates. They're already in the 2019 Delegation of Authority. There's just some language changes in the code.
Chapter 2, Federal, Commonwealth, and Local Offices. There are no new delegations of authority. Chapter 3, Elections, Districts, Precincts, and Polling Places. Also, no changes.
With regards to Chapter 4, as it deals with voter registration, there is 1 code provision that we recommend is delegated to the Department of Elections, as it deals with electronically transmitting data, information to elect from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and there are no additional amendments.
If I could stop you for a second. when your charts say elect will act on behalf of the SVP, what you're saying is that the board is delegating this responsibility to you.
Yes.
Chapter 5, candidates for office. There are no new delegations of authority, although there are 3 language updates.
For Chapter 6, as it relates to the election, there are 3 new code provisions that we would like to delegate to the Department of Elections. However, I would like to note that the first 2 code provisions are already in the 2019 delegations of authority. They have just changed the code section, so we did include it here. Beyond that, we just have 2 new code provisions that we recommend are retained by the board, and then 2 language updates.
Chapter 7, absentee voting. There are 2 delegations that have been delegated to the business department regarding code amended in 2020. This is in regards to the emergency approvals of alternative voter satellite offices and instructions on those requirements. 4 delegations have been retained by the board and 5 language updates.
For Chapter 8, as it deals with recount and contested elections, we have 2 code provisions that we recommend are retained by the board, and 1 code provision that requires a language update. We have no additional amendments or anything to delegate to the Department of Elections as it relates to this chapter.
Chapter 9, campaign finance. There is 1 delegation of authority given to the department, and that is regarding the recording of single contributions of $1,000 or more by January 15th. 2 delegations are retained by the board, and 1 has a language revision.
There are no amendments or revisions to Chapter 10 as it deals with election offenses. And then we would like to add to the delegations of authority Title 15.2, Subtitle 1, Chapter 7. And so that deals with counties, cities, and towns. And so there are 2 code provisions that we are recommending should be retained by the board as it deals with promulgating regulations and prescribing standards as it relates to instant runoff voting.
Does the board have any questions or comments at this time?
I know.
A lot.
So, actually, what is our timeline for doing this? Do we have to act on all this today, or could we maybe, the general question, is our timeline such that we need to act on all these today? Because this is a big chunk of change, and it delegates a lot of authority. So I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just kind of asking if print anything to wait maybe 1 more month to take final action.
No, I mean, Mr. Vice Chair and Mr. Chairman, the only harm, if anything were to come up that you haven't delegated, we'll be calling you back here. But no, I mean, we can tackle this at the next board meeting, for sure, give you a little bit more time to digest it. You know, and specifically the specific changes that they've recommended. And if you have any heartburn over those, please let me know before that board meeting, because then we can make the changes.
That'll save my 2 other additional questions.
Okay. And that's fine. It is a lot to digest. The hope is, you know, our intention is to bring this back every year. 2020 was a year like no other, so it didn't get done, but it will be done. You know, hopefully no more pandemic. But we'll definitely bring this back next time if that's what the board would like.
I think that would be preferable, without objection. One thing that, as we review all this material, is can you give any kind of overarching philosophy on what is delegated and what you would have us delegate and what you would have us retain?
Definitely, I cut that from my speech. So, I'm glad that you asked, and I was going to say it. So generally speaking, the state board is authorized to prescribe standard forms for voter registration revise, coordinate, and adopt regulations governing the work of local electoral boards, registrars, and officers of elections. The department conducts the board's administrative and programmatic operations and discharges the board's duties consistent with delegated authority. Now, if you look at sort of the first memo that kind of encapsulates all the information in your packet surrounding the delegations, that verbiage is there too. So don't feel like you have to memorize what I said, but you can read that at a later time as you're going over the processing.
Okay, that's very helpful. Any additional comments, questions? Without objection, we'll defer your 100 pages of hard work until our next meeting, so we'll take action on it.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank them, I think it's well over.
All right, next item on our agenda is campaign finance regulations, media advertisements. Mr. Davenport?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's good to see all of you in person. So I have 3 regulatory actions that are proposed by the department that I'm going to review for you today. I will start with the campaign finance regulation for print media advertisements. As background, this is an action we're taking based on House Bill 1238 from Virginia's 2020 General Assembly session. This just instructs the state board to promulgate regulations for the implementation of this new bill's provisions. The state board is to implement regulations related to this topic no later than July 1st, 2021. However, enforcement of these is delayed until July 1st, 2024. So this is really just an action to post the reg, and it gives notice to future candidates of what the print media requirement would be.
So the General Assembly imposed a July 1 deadline on us, but gave until January 1.
July 1 deadline for this to sit for people to take notice of, but hopefully before 2024.
When we put the demo today, start the process, so I understand if we start the process for this by July 1, then we will go out for public comment.
This is somewhat different than Ms. Buckley's RCV regulation. The way this would work, the regulation itself would become official. It wouldn't just be sitting for public comment, is my understanding. However, it's sort of like a delayed enactment in legislation. It wouldn't be effective until 2024.
So we're going to ask for public comment on this?
Theoretically, because the reg wouldn't really apply, it wouldn't be effective for a candidate, for example, until 2024. If this were to go up, it wouldn't technically just be going up for public comment, but if the public commented and you had an issue, or if the public had an issue and made a good point about why the reg needs to change, we could do that. I could come back, present an updated reg based on public comment, and we would amend the current regulations before 2024.
So the second best is that we can always come back and fix it again.
Absolutely, yes, we have plenty of time.
If something should arise that warrants it, you can come back anytime in the next.
Yeah, it's a matter of form versus function, sort of, compared to Ms. Buckley's regulation. Even though we're technically making this effective, we have plenty of time to change it if the public makes a comment, and we feel that there's a policy needs to change. Let me give you, on top of that, if there's no more form questions, we can give you guys just sort of a brief summary of what the reg would do. So the purpose of the regulation is to guarantee the disclosure statements of certain political print media ads are displayed in a conspicuous manner and are proportionate to the size of the advertisement. That language is already in code, but this specific directive was given for us to add a little more piece to that through the state board. The proposed regulation here has a few key features. It sets standards for the disclosure statements on print advertisements sponsored by a candidate campaign committee or by a person or political committee other than the candidate campaign committee. The print advertisements from these parties under the reg must have disclosure statements that are clear and conspicuous. The specific standards that are here were actually taken from a current federal requirement. It's Federal Election Commission's requirement 11 CFR 110.11, which is under the brief summary, if you wanted to look at it on your own. The rules would be for an advertisement that is 24 by 36 inches or smaller, 12-point font would meet this requirement. That doesn't explicitly mean it couldn't be smaller, but any candidate would be on notice 12-point font is good enough. The disclosure statement would need to be in a printed box set apart from the other contents of the communication. Further, the disclosure statement must have a reasonable degree of color contrast with the advertisement's background. That's defined as being placed in black print on a white background, or parties can meet this requirement if the degree of contrast between a disclosure statement and an advertisement's background is no less than the contrast between the background and the largest text on the advertisement. It sounds technical, but it basically means whatever your biggest text is, the contrast between that and the background, just make sure your disclosure is at least that contrasted. That's going to conclude the first part of the presentation. However, I'll give this back to the board for any questions you or the public has.
Members of the board have any questions? Does any member of the public signify that they wish to speak on this item?
And then I would just propose, or recommend rather, that a board member propose the suggested motion on the first page of the paper.
Page 413.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the full, your whole big full document in front of me.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion that the board approve the department's proposal.
I move that the board approve the department's proposal for regulatory action regarding print media requirements for political campaign advertisements.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the department's proposal. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Next up is Mr. Davenport again with absentee witness signatures during a state of emergency.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to shift gears, and I'll only ask you to do that one more time after this. The background for this proposal. So this proposed regulatory action would guide the Department of Elections and local election officials in administering Code of Virginia, Section 242707. That was updated during this General Assembly session. The code has been amended so that absentee voters are not required to obtain witness signatures on absentee ballot envelopes under certain conditions. It's when there is an election held during a declared state of emergency related to a communicable disease of public health threat. The General Assembly passed this legislation in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and issues that people had obtaining witness signatures safely during that pandemic. This provision would apply to future emergencies as well beyond COVID-19 of a similar nature. The regulation here is prescribed by the law. We're supposed to pass the regulation, and what this seeks to do is clarify the law to avoid ambiguity. There's a lot of information here, but sort of specifically how this would work in the text of the reg is if there's an ongoing state of emergency that meets these conditions, so a communicable disease of public health threat, and it is going on at the beginning of the early voting period, then all absentee ballots submitted during that early voting period do not require a witness signature. So if we enter the early voting period while there's an ongoing state of emergency, for uniformity's sake, no one would be required to obtain a witness signature. In the event that an issue like this, a pandemic, were to start in the middle of early voting, the rule would be that from the moment the governor declared a state of emergency forward, any ballot returned would not require a witness signature. Otherwise, in Virginia, witness signatures remain the law, the rule of the land. With that, I will hand this over to the board and the public for questions.
Members have any questions of Mr. Davenport about this proposal? Has any member of the public signified interest in speaking to this proposal? Very good.
Chairman, I move the board approves this proposed regulatory action regarding absentee ballot witness signatures during a state of emergency.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve this proposed regulatory action? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davenport?
All right, I have one final regulatory action to propose for you today. This one regards absentee printing and mailing of absentee ballots through private parties, third-party vendors. So the General Assembly passed another law this year. It was Senate Bill 1239 from this General Assembly session. It modifies Section 242-706 of the Code of Virginia by inserting subsection D. Subsection D allows our general registrar to contract with private parties for the assembling and mailing of absentee ballots. I believe that the general registrars were interested and excited for this legislation to pass because they found the burden of mailing absentee ballots in-house in certain localities to be difficult as we transition to many more absentee voters in Virginia. The rule stated in the new 242-706 is the State Board of Elections shall promulgate regulations to implement the provisions of this act to be effective within 60 days of its enactment. Such regulations shall include the processes that ensure secure and timely delivery of voter information to contractors and reports of mailed absentee ballots from contractors. In that spirit, the department prepared a regulation that does just those things. If you're looking at the regulation text that we've given you, it's essentially broken down into two sections. I will not read all of it to you, but I will sort of state themes to give you an understanding of how this operates. The first section of the regulation essentially highlights the most important duties of registrars. Many of these are code-driven anyway, but we restate them or specify them here to make sure ultimately the registrars are aware that at the end of the day, the mailing process is still their responsibility and that they must securely and accurately get those absentee ballots mailed on time. The second half of the regulation essentially puts specific contract terms that would be required in any contract that a registrar forms with a third party for mailing. The contract terms, again, I won't go into the specifics, but they're all there just to make sure that there's always secure transfer of voter information, that only the most limited information necessary is given to a third party, and it makes third parties responsible for meeting all deadlines that are required by the code as far as mailing and assembling absentee ballots goes. It also requires registrars to guarantee that there is a penalty, at least a fee, if for some reason there's not an exact timely mailing or assembling of the absentee ballots based on the code. The last thing I want to do before I hand this one over to you for questions is I just want to give special thanks here. This was an important reg and a reg that required a lot of research to get done. Rachel Wallace, who is our chief confidential policy analyst from the governor, was a huge help pulling this together. I would not be able to do it alone. I also want to thank Allison Robbins and Walt Latham from the registrar community. They gave us a ton of input as to what we could do to make sure this was a good, secure reg, but also meets the need of the registrars. And with that, I will hand this over to you guys for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davenport. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, just procedurally, this is it. This is the reg. It's going to go, if we approve it, it's going to go into effect.
Yes, this would be the effective regulation. We could obviously always revisit to refine the regs, but this would be effective for the July 1 law that goes into effect.
Right. My second question is, during the formation of this reg, did you give any thought to a certification of vendors process similar to what we have for voting systems?
Yes, I had many conversations with Karen Hoyt-Stewart on our team because she is the expert on certification and all things related to voting systems. Karen and I worked together to make sure the terms of the reg itself guarantee that this process will be done securely. Karen had also assured me that that was a new process for Virginia. It's not an entirely new process, and many of our vendors should be prepared to do this well.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments?
No, I had a similar question, as to if you had an approximate number for how many third-party contractors are out there right now, that would give
So I do not, I will tell you, I don't know numbers offhand. However, I do know that many of the vendors that were certified for our election certifications for voting systems offer this service as well. And I actually, don't quote me on this, I don't know it for sure, set in stone, but I believe some of the registrar's contracts for the voting systems we've already secured would also, through that contract, they're supposed to use that vendor for these services as well. So for example, if you formed a contract with Dominion, then you would also use Dominion for your mail-in.
So, you've been spending long, you've been doing so well. That brings up an interesting question. Do the four current systems also engage in this? Is it anticipated that they will just simply roll over an additional piece of work?
No, so it wouldn't be related to the system specifically, and I don't want to travel too far down the tech path because the law and policy are where my expertise is going down that road. But no, it would be a separate process, and that's part of the function of the reg is to make sure the negotiation of that process has these safeguards in place. So no, I don't necessarily think it's just a rollover, but I'm saying that I think some localities, through their contract with the voting systems they have through that vendor, will be able to procure this service as well.
So under 2E, I think you mentioned that, the way this is set up now, that the third party will sign a statement before the work is commenced. And then there's a comment about a penalty, which my lawyer says could be up to a class 5 felony. Was any consideration given to having these third-party vendors certify their work after it was done rather than before it was done?
Do you mean having an additional I'm sorry, could you clarify your question?
I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
I'm reading from 2E.
Yes.
A party printing, assembling, or mailing the materials shall sign a statement before the work is commenced, granting subject penalties for making false statements that they will print, assemble, and mail the ballots requested in accordance with the instructions.
Yes, I'm sorry, I misunderstood before. I'm with you now. So yes, the requirement would be to sign that statement before, but they would be subject to the penalties after as well. The statement is just an agreement, an acknowledgement beforehand. We are obligated to do this, but of course they'd still be subject to any breach of contract, which would include a breach of that term.
So there's no additional value to have certified something after they've done it up front.
Yeah, and we could, I think it would be outside of the scope, though, not necessarily a bad idea. There may be a reason to maybe visit a more specific certification process in the future, but under the law, these agreements are technically between the registrar and the third party. It's not between the state. Sort of the realm of power we were given is to promulgate regulations, so a state certification process might be outside of the scope of what we're allowed to do under this rule, because the registrars are forming these contracts individually. But again, I'm stepping outside of my expertise right now.
Registrars are buying voting systems by themselves too, so.
The code gives us a little more beef, I believe, in the 600s as far as being able to set certification standards for the voting systems. There was no specific mention of being able to do that in this code section, at least during this General Assembly session. They may revisit that in the future.
Mr. Chair. So, to clarify though, I think the Vice Chairman is wondering, should there be a certification that they have completed the work and done it accurately? Is that more your question? Yeah, I think that the fact that they sign that ahead of time, that they're going to do it, they're certifying that it will be accurate ahead of time. So I don't know that there's a need, but I understand your question. It's something we can look into.
I appreciate the Commissioner. I guess since this bill got passed, that the registrars really want this.
That's my understanding, is that this was very...
Some of us may not be warm and fuzzy about it. I appreciate your presentation.
Yes, the General Assembly passed that law, and this regulation is our best effort to make sure that things will be done in a productive, secure way.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, we're kind of on the outside on this one. most states, many states, provide the ability for third parties to print and mail, absentee ballots, especially those that, have a high turnout in the absentee, by mail, voters.
So this is, what you're saying is that this isn't a brand new field, this is something that other states have gone before us.
As much as I'd like to say Virginia is blazing a new path in everything we do, this is not that.
I would just assume that other states had blazed this trail.
And Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, we did reach out to the states. That was part of the help that Rachel Wallace provided, was doing that research. So we made sure to check every available resource here.
Very good.
The bottom line is, with the dramatic increase in absentee voting, this is obviously going to be growth in this precinct.
Right. All right. Additional comments or questions? Has any member of the public signified that they wish to speak on this item? Very good. In that event, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed regulation.
I guess it's my turn. Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the department's proposed regulations regarding third parties assembling and mailing absentee ballots.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the department's proposed regulation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Mr. Davenport, I think you're done for today.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and board. Have a good one. Thank you.
Next is revised stand by your ad policy 2021-001.
Hello, how are you all today? If you recall back in February 23rd to be precise, is when we updated our policy, so I'm going to be easy on you today. And I've just come to you with our standard operating procedures on how we're going to process complaints as they come in, how I notify absolutely everybody involved. I put together the presentation and bring it to you. And so if you have any questions, I'm not going to bore you with my whole 3.5 pages that are written here.
Now, back in February, as I recall, we did away with anonymous complaints. Is that correct?
That was actually done away with about a year or so ago.
Okay.
We just made it really official in February.
So what this does is track all the way through from the receipt of a complaint through notification.
Yes, if you were to complain, or have a complaint, you would send it through the SVYA email, not the email service, through the SVYA form site. I have everybody funneled into that one. That way they are required to give us the evidence, the complaint, the dates when everything happened, all those questions that you guys have, that's what's asked of the complainant when they put it in the process. Instead of, as we once had, you could call up and complain, and I don't have the authority to investigate, so all I had was a complaint and I had nothing to bring to you. So this way now they have to go through the form site, and they will go ahead and I will process it from there and bring you all of your information. I even brought you my book of how I bring everything, so whenever you have a question, I will come up with absolutely everything they have presented me for your.
How many different colors do you have in that?
This one has 12. I love a good colorful setup.
All right. Do the members of the board have any questions or comments about Ms. Alexander's 3.5 pages of presentation? I looked at this last night and I thought the flow chart that you put here is very, very efficient.
Well, I thank you, but I've got to give credit to Ariel. I just, updated the last one she did.
So have we had any complaints of this calendar?
Oh, yeah. We've got about 14 we're going to look at for August 3rd, but once I go through all the evidence and make sure that they're all good, legitimate complaints, I'm hoping to get you down to 9. But I can guarantee you somebody else is going to complain before that.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the changes that we made is to have basically stand by your ad date twice a year.
Yes, thank goodness. So this way now I actually can tell everybody, as soon as they make their complaint, I can tell them when the hearing's going to be, instead instead of us sitting around going, are we gonna do it or are we not gonna do it? Now we know when we're gonna do it, so it'll be nice and efficient, and we can all get it done with in one painful meeting and be done. Much as I love campaign finance, I'll tell you, SBYA is not the one I like.
I appreciate that. One concern that I had, and I don't know if it should have come up earlier, is January a good meeting to plug in, stand by your ad, or what else do we have, on a regular basis on the docket?
Mr. Chairman, the reason that January was chosen, if there's, and I don't even want to say it. So the other day I mentioned something about my son not getting scored on, and 2 minutes later he got scored on, and told me in the soccer game, so.
You're about to jinx us, aren't you?
Please, I'm asking for your forgiveness. But if there's a recount, then, we want to make sure that we are not, the entire potency agency is on a recount, especially a statewide recount. And we want to be sure that we are handling those. I would also point out that in the past few years, we've had special elections that come up through December into early January, especially in a gubernatorial year. We end up having a lot of special elections. So it wouldn't be good sense to do it before January because of those.
It also comes after our major filing deadline, so it gives me an actual chance to make sure everything's prepared properly for you, because I'm not panicking about a deadline at that point.
Very good, very good. Additional comments or questions from the board? Any member of the public wish to speak on this? In that event, I will entertain a motion that the board adopt the process.
I move that the board adopt the enclosed process for the Department of Elections handling of complaints alleged violations of Chapter 9.5, stand by your ad.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the board adopt the stand by your ad process. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you
Ms.
so much.
Alexander. Next up is drawing for party order on the ballot. Mr. Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By law, the state board is to determine the order that political parties are to appear on the ballot for statewide, federal, and General Assembly offices. Before the board today is that determination for the Republican and Democratic parties. Elect staff recommends that the board determine by lot and then certify the ballot order for all general and special elections being held between July 1st, 2021 and April 30th, 2022. Mr. Chairman, I've left with the commissioners your apparatus for conducting the drawing here. We do have a recommended motion for the board to make after that drawing as well.
Okay, very good. Secretary Cruz, you and Vice Chair O'Bannon want to fight over who draws first?
You want me to hold these up?
I just did, the chairman
For
said you wanted.
the youngsters that we hired, these are called film cannons. Just in case you weren't aware.
35 millimeters.
Yes. Yes.
We have the motion before the action, or do we actually just?
I believe the drawing first.
I believe we draw first and then certify.
That is fine. So the first one is the Republican, written on, I will put it into the canister. So roll it up this time, because I'm feeling it. The next one is the Democratic. Speaking of which, Andrew, you found that 1926 election result. This poll has been in use by the State Board of Elections since the 70s. I'm not kidding. No. first one is Democratic.
Yes, well, that's a different order, right?
What's that?
It's
Susan first, yeah, so Susan first, okay,
Okay.
all right.
The first one would be the Republican Party, second would be Democratic.
There we go.
Very good.
Sorry, it wasn't a race then.
All right, so the order would be Republican and followed by Democratic.
I'll make the motion. Mr. Chairman, I move the board certify determination by lot of the ballot order for all general and special elections being held July 1, 2021 through April 30, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, the board certify the determination of ballot order. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Saunders. Next is our revised absentee ballot application. Mr. Nichols?
Good afternoon, Board. It's been a while since I've gotten to actually, stand up and discuss some things with you all. Very happy to be here and to get through some of these things relatively quickly. As we look at the revised absentee ballot application form, as you'll recall, we had a massive change from 2 years ago to last year when you guys approved the new form. This one is pretty much the same with some tweaks to update for the laws that were passed in 2021 and to reflect the law passed in 2020 that becomes effective on July 1st. Some of the changes are that sections 2 and 3 were rearranged from the previous form to just offer clarity for voters and kind of a usability, how they fill things out and how they'll think about the form. We changed the annual vote by mail section to permanent absentee, because that is one of the major changes that's happening soon. And the 7B was removed to reflect changes to the law that eliminated 416.1 for the first time voters who had registered to vote by mail. And so there are a couple of other pieces there that got changed. And so what we have here are two forms, because the bill that required the permanent absentee list also requires the requires the state board to come up with an application for a voter who is on the permanent list to make a change, like they want to change where they want the ballot sent for that one election, or they want to change that they vote in they've selected the Republican primary and want to vote in the Democratic primary this time. Or if they've made a change where they want to vote they've made the change saying they want to vote in the Democratic primary, but for all future ones, they want to vote in the Republican. And so we had to come up with a form that accomplishes those things as well, so those people who are on that permanent list can make those changes without having to just completely reapply. And so that's what you see as the second form, the one that is noted as the SBE 703.1C. We did work with general registrars on making amendments and changes to these two forms to try to come up with something that worked really well for them and for the voters, most importantly. And so we're asking today that you would approve these two forms so that we can begin to use them on July 1st when the new law goes in.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I've got one very small question. What was the change to item 8, voter statement signature? I went back to the statute and tried to figure out what.
Yes, absolutely. So what happened was item 8, the change was that if a person was on the annual absentee list, they were required to or applying for the annual absentee list, they were required to sign a statement saying that, to the best of their knowledge, they would remain a registered voter in Virginia and would remain at that address, registered in that locality for the remainder of the year. With the change in language to 703.1, that requirement for that particular statement to be included was removed.
Thank you. Board have additional comments or questions?
I realize that we have to do this to satisfy the General Assembly, but I guess this is more of a, is this going to be more confusing to voters than not? Particularly the one where you want to make a one-time change to vote in a primary.
Sure.
I guess that's one thing. How is the voter going to know what his status is on a regular basis? Number two, how does this may be for the commissioner, the technical people, how is this going to be reflected in that daily update of voter registration that we offer to the parties on a daily basis?
Yes, and those are both very fair questions. And the first thing I think I can say is that most of the applications that we get do not come in on a sheet of paper like these. Most of them do come through the online citizen portal. One of the benefits of that is that it is set up and will be set up beginning July 1st to step the voter through the process so that there's less room for error in making changes. One of the other things we're doing with that particular piece is to add that when a voter logs in using the citizen portal, it'll say, hey, you're on the permanent absentee list. Do you need to make one of these changes? And then lets them step through that process. Frankly, it may be a little confusing for voters who would use the paper form itself, but we don't expect those to be used nearly as often. And of course, general registrars in the department are always there to assist and help when filling out these kinds of documents.
As far as the daily list?
Yeah, the daily list. So, our requirement to provide that sort of thing doesn't change. We'll still be adding in, if someone has requested and been sent an absentee ballot, it will still be reflected in that list.
It'll all still be.
It'll all still be, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional comments, questions? Has any member of the public got an interest in speaking to this item? All right. In that event, I will entertain a motion for the adoption of this application form.
I move that the board adopt the revised Virginia absentee ballot application form and the Virginia permanent absentee voter single election change form as presented by staff to become effective on July 1, 2021.
Is there a second? Seconded that the board adopt the revised absentee ballot application form. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, member.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Next up is the commissioner describing elect's new organizational chart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Franchelle, I wasn't sure if we have this up on the screen? Okay. First of all, Mr. Chairman, Dave will be back to present a couple of things, but I think the entire staff from the department has finalized their stuff, except for Dave. So I just, about to talk about his org chart, but I'm the luckiest commissioner in the world, I think, and I just want to recognize each and every one of them. They put a lot of work into this. I think it's been very well organized, and we couldn't be having the success that we have without them. So thank you all for excellent work today that you've done. And our technical people who have made sure that this is done on a fabulous pitch. And special kudos to Franchelle, who had to put together 450 pages of documentation for you guys, and coordinate everybody to be here today, on top of our first hybrid meeting of 2021. So really just kudos to them. And the reason that I start off with that is not just because I'm so grateful to them, but when we talk about this org chart, it's important that the people you've seen here today have continuity, that the information that they've shared with you can be shared as we have turnover and we have new employees come in. So I wanted to quickly talk about this organizational chart. So when I started in 2018, we were in the midst of a JLARC review. JLARC released their findings in September of 2018. One of the many findings that they had, but two findings that relate to this particular organizational chart that I want to share with you. First was that there needed to be continuity between administrations. While each election comes up, we have a new governor, and therefore typically, as has happened over the last 20 to 30 years, we've had a new head of the agency here at what used to be the State Board of Elections, is now the Department of Elections. Having been a full-time employee here, in my various roles, I have seen firsthand how that can be disruptive to the agency. All good intention, for sure, in the appointments of those agency heads. However, it is rather disruptive. So the JLARC recommended the hiring of a full-time classified employee, the Director of Operations, which we have hired our first one in DJ, as I mentioned earlier today. They also talked about depoliticization of the day-to-day operational aspects of the organization. And so what we have done and implemented as of April 25th is this org chart. So you'll see here that the department has split up the day-to-day operational aspects and the policy aspects of the agency. Now, I'll talk first about the Director of Operations. So the Director of Operations has direct supervisory authority over our Chief Information Officer, as well as the Director of Information Security. The reason that's important is actually a veto recommendation that our Information Security and our Chief Information Officer be from two different tracks. The reason being is to ensure that information security is separate from software development, so that the arbiter can be the Director of Operations if there's ever any sort of disagreement in those areas. Then the Director of Operations will also be overseeing the Election Services Manager, currently Dave Nichols, and our Business Finance Manager, which is responsible for our day-to-day budget operation and fiscal management, as well as our administrative duties within the office. We've created a new position currently occupied by Gary Finch, but this is called the Enterprise Project Management Division. This division will be overseeing enterprise-wide, agency-wide, all projects that are going on. So not just our, IT projects when we're developing new software or enhancing VRS or replacing VRS, but ultimately all projects that are going on within the agency, to ensure that we understand where our resources are being allocated, but also working to ensure knowledge management and information management. So when we lose an employee, that information is retained so that it's easily transitioned to the new employee. So this is the Director of Operations role. BJ is already working on numerous projects in that area, along with our Enterprise Project Management Office. But for example, one of the big projects she's looking at is onboarding, to ensure that when somebody comes in, that they're getting the proper training, equipment, and information they need to be successful and hit the ground running from day one. On the other side, what we've tried to do is to separate the day-to-day from the policy. So you'll see the appointed commissioner, deputy commissioner, and confidential policy assistant are separate out from the day-to-day operational aspect of the agency to prevent or to address the politicization that could be possible I will say that, we've worked very hard in this agency and this administration, to depoliticize the day-to-day, to make it nonpartisan. I feel we've been very successful in that area. So in this case, the Deputy Commissioner will oversee the legislative and, policy, aspects of the agency, to ensure that, the information, the legislative, and appointed, entities are working, on those policy issues. And then specifically, we've created this new position called External Affairs Manager. This person is responsible for our, communications, and reviewing all communications before they go out, external communications. Also working, you all have attended or have, been privy to the continuity of operations, election day program that we have. That person is responsible for, or that position is responsible for, ensuring that those meetings are happening and that we're coordinating with all of our external agencies, be it the federal, state, or local level. But also serves as the public information officer for the agency, working directly with the media, also creating, and I spoke on it a little bit earlier, the voter education program that we have here, and that we're working on, to ensure that the public is well informed about how elections are administered here in Virginia. So that is a quick overview of our new organizational chart. I'm excited about it. As I mentioned, having been a full-time employee here, my goal since day one has been to ensure that no matter who sits in the seat as commissioner, that they have a staff that is working with tools and information that they can pass on from administration to administration, and ensure that elections are run smoothly from administration to administration, so that our day-to-day operations are not as impacted by changes to come. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Looking forward to my time.
Does the board have any questions of the commissioner about, the new org chart? If not, thank you, not only for this presentation, but for the joint. I was just going to say, it seems like we've actually accomplished a fair amount of what that JLARC study found. But I do have one question, not to let you off so easily. Is the error between the state board and the department going in the wrong direction?
Well, I think you can put an arrow on both sides.
Yeah,
that'll probably make more sense. You're actually very correct there. I do not oversee the state board of elections as much as I would like. No, I'm just kidding. But to your earlier point, Mr. Vice Chairman, one of the things I want to do before the end of this administration is to highlight how far we've come as far as the JLARC recommendations. To point out that this governor's administration took those recommendations seriously and worked to address them. So yes, SVRS replacement, risk maintenance, training, oversight of General Registrar of Electoral Board, and now the Director of Operations and equalization of the day-to-day operational aspects of the agency. So, yes, I intend to boast proudly about that.
Additional questions or comments? If not, thank you for the presentation as well as the work that you've done, that we've experienced over the past 2 years in taking an organization and improving not only communications but also management and administration of the functions. With that, the next item on our agenda is a brief update on the status of the Office of Attorney General investigation of the City of Richmond Electoral Board. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman Briggs and members of the board. As you said, I will keep my comments brief at this time. The Attorney General asked me to confirm for you that we are in receipt, and thank you for your June 17th, 2021 letter regarding the allegations of the Richmond City Electoral Board. As you know, the Attorney General takes all allegations of elections improprieties and violations very seriously, particularly when they may have had material adverse effect on the conduct of an election. The Attorney General is committed to devoting the necessary resources to determine the impact that such allegations that have been raised, if true, may have held on the conduct of the election. And the Attorney General will provide the State Board with such information regarding this matter at such a time or times as appropriate, and also following that its disclosure would not impair the integrity of any ongoing investigation. With that, I will be open for any questions.
Do members of the board have any questions about this update?
I appreciate the update. I just want to make a point that I realize you don't want to impede the AG, but there is a timeliness to settling this because there are ongoing elections. There's a general election that will occur in the city of Richmond in November. So I hope we can get moving on this. We'll do that.
Understood, yes, thank you, Vice Chairman Dr. O'Bannon. We understand, and again, as I stated, the upholding of the integrity of elections is equally as important to the Attorney General as it is to you all. So we will proceed as quickly as possible.
Additional comments or questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Lewis. The next item on the agenda is candidate filing extension. Nichols?
Good afternoon again, members of the board. We seem to see several of these with each election cycle. We do have some requests for an extension to file candidate documents under 703 of the Code of Virginia. These would be the candidate certificate of qualification and or the statement of economic interest. We did have several candidates who did not file those timely and are requesting an extension of that so that they could file those, or in many cases have already filed and just would request the extension so that those could be extended. The board has dealt with extensions of this nature in the past, and so I turn it back over to you for next steps.
Members of the board have any comments or questions? Is there any member
Not
of
at
the
this
public?
time. This is Joyce Smith, Vice Chairman of the Electoral Board. I don't have any questions at this time.
Is there somebody on the line?
Is someone saying they
Yes.
did not?
This is Joyce Smith. You can't hear me? Couldn't hear me. I had unmuted it.
So, to the audience, please do not speak without requesting through the chat room or the display box to be recognized, and the board will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. Thank you.
I have a question for Ms. Nichols.
This is Joyce Smith at this time. I don't have any questions.
Requests for acceptance of papers and so on. Would there be any jeopardy to any kind of time process in deferring this until our next meeting?
Not necessarily, because you know, we aren't looking at producing ballots, all that soon. I will note that these particular requests are similar to the ones you would have received after the filing deadline for the June primary, so the things we looked at in March. You know, these were for other candidates who were required to file by June 8th on primary day. These are specifically just the candidate documents and not the party documents.
Right. There's one in particular where I'd like to get some additional information. It has to do with a claim that the registrar's office basically gave the green light to this individual. I'd like to get some additional information on that, and in order to do that, what I'd like to do, my objection is to defer this item until our next meeting.
That, and I have, you know, whatever you guys want to do, obviously, but I do want to point out that, and it may not have been in the original documentation that you received, but we did update the board working papers with information from the general registrar in Radford.
I saw that. Now, this is
a different one. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would it be appropriate for me to ask a question of council?
Certainly.
Is it your understanding, Carol, that to grant an extension under 503 is to grant an extension for all candidates and not to be able to individualize for one specific candidate?
That is correct, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, without objection, we'll defer action on this item until our next meeting. The final substantive item on the agenda is a request for extension of certification for a general registrar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've discussed previously, the board did implement a certification program for general registrars as required by the General Assembly last year. We're coming up on the completion of the first year of that. We do have, as the Commissioner mentioned earlier, several general registrars who have not completed certification yet, and there is an option within 24.2-103C for the state board to extend that deadline for up to 3 months on a case-by-case basis. So this is not a blanket extension. It would be for only for those who ask for it. In this case, and I do have to apologize because I think maybe some of the information I put in says the wrong locality, but the Appomattox general registrar has not yet completed certification, and that general registrar's electoral board has asked for the extension. There have been some personal and personnel issues in that office that have prevented the GR from being able to complete the certification at this time, and they've asked for an extension for 3 months.
Board have any comments, questions?
I'm just wondering, have they given any more specific information as to why they need so much time?
Nothing on why they would need the time. I think it's likely they're asking for the 3 months because 3 months is available. But the board can make whatever determination on the time frame that you would choose to make. The code does say up to 3 months.
But just so I understand, this is a one-time extension? So this is it, they don't get the credit, and they cannot be registered?
That's my understanding.
I have a question related to this request. Mr. Commissioner, you earlier said that there are how many jurisdictions that are still outstanding?
9 at There are none, Mr. Chairman.
And today is June 22nd.
Yes, and to clarify, the commissioner's statements from earlier, we actually implemented the program on July 7th of last year. So general registrars have until July 7th of this year to complete it, rather than, June 30th.
Mr. Chairman, I would also point out that we implemented this on July 7th of last year.
All right. And any member of the public, signify they wish to speak on this item? All right. The request was for an extension of 3 months to October 7th. I don't know what the will of the board is on that time frame, as well as on the question of granting extensions, which the board has previously shown itself to be unenthusiastic about.
My concern is that the October 7th, extension is cutting it really close to the November election, and if there's an issue, I don't know that we would have time to come back in between, that time period. After this week, a special meeting. I would suggest if there's any extensions that would be granted, that would be, 30 to 45 days, so that way it would still be during the summertime period, and have some type of clarity, or getting into the early voting period.
Dr. Bannon? Have a motion?
Yes, good.
I'll second. 45 minutes. All right, it's been moved and seconded that the board grant a request from the Electoral Board of Appomattox County for their general registrar to have an additional 45 days. I haven't done the math on that, but
We will.
I'm certain that someone will, to complete the State Board of Elections certification program. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. And you will notify the electoral board of our action. All right, our final, except for adjournment, of course, our penultimate item on the agenda is public comment. Tyson, I believe the process is we start with anyone who has signed up in person.
Going in person, I have Lee Goodman.
Welcome, Mr. Goodman. And as we said earlier, we would request that you limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, Secretary of the Cruz, and Commissioner Piper, good to see you. I represent the Republican Party of Virginia. We have a circumstance where in the 33rd House District, the Loudoun County area, Delegate David LaRock was nominated by the party, and the LBC chair certified his nomination under 24.2-511 on June 16, when the deadline set for party chair certifications was June 14th. So it came in 2 days after the deadline in the statute. Now, the statute we don't read as a qualification for the ballot. It is a directive to party chairs to act and to act by a certain date. But unlike the other circumstances that you were just addressing, which is the candidate qualification papers, the statute does call it a deadline. And because it goes to the qualifications of the candidate, that is a substantive qualification to be on the ballot. And as you know, under Section 503, when the state candidates do not file timely, the board is granted statutory discretion, explicit in statute, to extend that deadline. You were just having that discussion. Section 511 also has a savings clause. It doesn't grant you discretion. Instead, it imposes on this board an obligation. It says, should the party chairman fail to make such certification, the state board shall declare that the candidate is the nominee
of the particular party and direct that his name be treated as if certified by the party chairman. So both statutes have a savings provision. They operate differently. What is peculiar about this provision that I just read in Section 511 is it appears in an awkward location. The code was broken out into A and B in 1993 amendments. I believe you may have heard this argument from Terry Kilgore's representatives in 2019. We've done the archaeology. We've looked at the history of that statute. In 1970, it was one paragraph. The party chairman shall certify the winner of a primary, and the end of the section had this savings provision that put the obligation on you to go ahead and certify for inclusion on the ballot. In 1972, it was broken into two paragraphs with more elaboration on the certification requirement, but still, it was one section concluded with that provision. In 1993, the Code Commission broke it into Section A and Section B, and the Code Commission's report indicated there was no substantive change in the statute intended, but what we had was a structural balkanization of the two. We believe that provision still applies in the case of a state candidate for state office where the party chair did not certify. Second, there are some equities and circumstances here that we have laid out in detail in a letter that we submitted to the board this morning. We know that the board probably won't have time to review those circumstances, but particularly here, sympathetic is David LaRock, because his assistant called the department on June 8th, with plenty of time to cure any deficiencies in his paperwork, and inquired. And we have an affidavit from his assistant who called and said, is all of Delegate LaRock's paperwork in order? And they mentioned one missing document, and that was his statement of economic interest. I'll rest there, Mr. Chairman, except to ask for one thing. The details are in the papers. Time is running. There would be alternative courses for Delegate LaRock. We would ask for prompt action, a prompt decision on this by the board. We believe the board has to certify in the statute, but we also think the board could fall back and simply accept that certification given the circumstances and the equities presented. We would respectfully ask that the board act by the July 4 weekend so that David LaRock can make any adjustments he needs to make in his campaigning. You know, we're on a tight turnaround time. There may be other statutory alternatives, and given the First Amendment rights at stake, we would just ask for prompt attention and a resolution to this matter. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Goode. As you pointed out, this is not a case of first impression. It's something that the board has dealt with previously. What I would like to do is to defer action today and to not only review the material that you provided, but also to look back and make sure that we proceed with respect to precedent in this matter. Do any members of the board have additional questions or comments?
Well, I want to thank Mr. Goode for explaining where they are. I will say I remember that when we had Kilgore, we actually took no action that day with respect to the situation. I would like for us to be able, perhaps even to have a remote meeting which would put us by June 30th. We could deal with just these items as we have done in the past, and schedule chapters. So that would, I think, be a reasonable alternative.
Thank you, Dr. O'Bannon. Additional questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there additional individuals who wish to speak?
Next up is Kelly Fowler, with the Virginia Democrat Committee, and she should be on mute.
Thank you so much, Chairman Brink and Vice Chairman O'Bannon and Secretary LaCruz. In my role as chairwoman of the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee, I'm requesting that you accept the Elect 511 forms provided by the Department of Election in a timely manner, thereby declaring Laura Wood-Haber the Democratic nominee for treasurer and Antonio Pissarro Jr. as the Democratic nominee for sheriff through the authority granted to you by 24.2-511B of the Virginia Code. I am happy to answer any questions, but I did want to get this in front of the board as soon as possible.
Thanks, Ms. Fowler. Your request was forwarded to, I think, all three members of the board. And as I said earlier, we have several issues of statements, filings that I think we should defer, examine, and handle at a later meeting. Any members of the board have any questions of Delegate Fowler? If not, thank you for providing this information to us. Are there any additional speakers? All right, then we've concluded public comment, and the only other item on this 20 agenda list is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, we're going to not deal with the House District 33.
What we'll do, we'll look at it at a date, and we can do it remotely.
So should that be a separate motion? Since we have a different timeline, I can do that next week.
Are you asking, I'm sorry, are you asking for a motion to require us to set up a meeting, have another meeting?
So I would request that we have a special meeting to deal with the House District 33 General Assembly House Development issue, which can be done remotely, do it by June 30th. That is distinctive from the Virginia Beach one, which is not House race.
That's correct. I will direct staff to ensure that we're meeting by June 30th. If you want to make a motion, that's fine. But I promise to make it happen. It doesn't matter to me, but we are fully engaged to make that happen by June 30th. Having it remotely would be ideal. Because I'll be in the beach.
I will take the commissioner at his word that we will deal with House District 33 by June 30th. Thank you.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes 3-0. We'll see you sometime next week remotely.